How do you do? I'm Alfred Hitchcock, and I would like to tell you about my latest motion picture, Marnie.
Robbed almost $10,000, and that girl did it. Marion Holland.
Aren't you Peggy Nicholson?
Is Edgar your real name?
Yes, Edgar. Margaret Edgar.
Are you a compulsive thief, a pathological liar?
You talk as if this was some kind of regular thing I do.
Where's the money?
Like the Bible says, money answereth all things.
We don't talk smart about the Bible in this house.
Is her mother that ghastly?
I don't have a mother. I don't have anybody.
Marnie?
I think you're sick.
I know what I am.
I doubt that you do, Marnie.
You don't know the whole story, and nobody does but me.
One might call Marnie a sex mystery. That is, if one used such words.
No, don't! Don't! Isn't it plain enough? I cannot bear to be handled.
What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you.
I can't.
Did you have a tough childhood?
Not particularly.
I think you did.
Shut up, Marnie!
No, remember, Marnie.
Right after Psycho, Hitchcock called me saying that he was buying a book because Grace Kelly wanted to return to the screen with him, make a movie with him. He was very pleased with this and wanted very much to work with her again, and he had bought a book called Marnie by Winston Graham, British writer, very good writer.
My mother and father were very close friends of Princess Grace and Prince Rainier. And when my father found this story, Marnie, they went over and they talked to Grace, and she loved the story and really was prepared to come back.
He had told her a little about it, and she liked what she heard. So we sat down for several weeks and just talked about how we would make a movie of this. And then I went home and wrote the outline, which was a very extended, very detailed outline with dialogue in it. And I felt that Marnie herself was a devastating character in her inability to keep from stealing things. She felt what she wanted was hers. And I felt that she was a strange, unlikable woman, by which I mean men might not like her, but they could fall in love with her. And I felt that the thrill of the movie was the triangle. In the book, Marnie, and in my treatment of it, there were two men in love with Marnie. These men worked in the same firm and were rivals in a work sense, as well as in a romantic sense of wanting Marnie. And I think that that may have been what attracted Hitchcock in the first place. He liked that. It's in Notorious. It's in a lot of his movies. You'll see a woman torn between two men, or two men ready to kill each other over a woman. And that's what we got in Marnie. And I liked that very much. In the movie, final movie version that I saw, I don't know how it got. About the time that I was finishing the outline, I had a meeting with him, and he said, Miss Kelly has changed her mind. And I could see that he was very angry about this, and I'm not sure that he would ever forgive her for that.
Unfortunately, what happened in between the time she agreed and between, it was ready to go, they were having large problems in Monaco. And Rainier finally didn't think it was a good time for her to be gone. And that's why she didn't do it.
He was very, very disappointed. And I tried to suggest other actresses. I said, I could name 10 right now who could play Marnie. And he said, no, it was over. So I went away and did other stuff, and he went on and did The Birds. And then by the time he had done The Birds and decided that Tippi Hedren could do Marnie, I had created a television show, The Outer Limits. I was producing it and not available.
After I wrote The Birds, Hitch sent me Marnie. I thought it was good. I thought it was a good novel, a good thriller, not a mystery, but a thriller. Good one. A lot of suspense in it. I thought I could do something good with it. There's a scene in the book and in the movie when the Mark Rutland character is on his honeymoon with Marnie, who is frigid. And he is approaching her to make love to her, and she backs away and is cowering and trembling and really shaking in fear, and he rapes her. Talk about it because I don't like it. And he said, which scene is that? And I said, the scene where he rapes her on their honeymoon night. And he says, oh, don't worry about that. We'll talk about that later. I felt it not heroic of the lead character to rape his wife when he sees there's something wrong here with the woman. You know, she's not being coy or girlish. You know, she's terrified. And I felt this was wrong dramatically. And I also felt that I would have a hell of a time recovering him from this scene. I would, you know, it's hard to recover a character once he does this. I knew every woman in the audience would hate him. Sean Connery or whoever, Rock Hudson, they'd hate him if he raped this woman. And he disagreed with me entirely. He totally disagreed when we finally got this out in the open. And I went home and I wrote the script, and I got to that scene, and I wrote a good rape scene. And then I wrote the scene the way I thought it should go, where he does not rape her, he's understanding. And I put my scene in the body of the script on white pages, and I did the rape scene outside the script on yellow pages, and I sent the script plus the alternate scene to Hitch, and I said, I think when you've read this, you'll understand why I did it this way, and you'll understand that this is the better way to go. And I got fired a couple of days later.
The rape scene is interesting because I must say, you wanted a rape scene, and I wrote a rape scene. I don't remember any consternation whatsoever. Years and years later, when I meet Evan Hunter, and he says that his relationship with Hitch on that project broke up over that rape scene, I was kind of astonished at my lack of sensitivity. It just didn't make that much difference to me. It was a scene.
She said, "You bought your ticket back to New York the minute you gave that talk to him. You bought your ticket back to New York." She said, "The only reason you wanted to do that movie was for that scene."
When you talk about a rape scene, I think of somebody grabbing somebody, a stranger in a park, and forcing them, and blah, 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 blah. This was just a trying marital situation. Well, I did not define it as rape. And Hitch never used the word rape with me. I guess he'd learned his lesson when he had the hoo-ha with Evan. At that time, I didn't have a career. I had written one play that had been optioned. I had a very difficult time casting it, and it had never really got done. I wrote a second play, which was The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and because of some problems in the producer's personal life, it didn't get on as soon as we had thought it would. Actually, it was done in London first because of this. But as a result, that play sat around for a while, and during that time, Hitch, who had access to agents' offices, of course, read it and called me and asked me if I wanted to make a movie, which was out of such left field, because in those days, every kid who graduated from school didn't want to make a movie. And I was trying to make a Broadway career. I don't think I would have gone out there if it had been anybody but Hitch.
Well, I do different things on different days.
Like what?
Well, on Mondays and Wednesdays, I work for the Traveler's Aid at the airport.
Helping travelers.
No, misdirecting them. I thought you could read my character.
All during the time that we were filming The Birds, I was aware that Marnie was being written by J. Preston Allen. And Grace Kelly was going to play the part. And I remember doing the scene with Rod Taylor up on the hill. It was during that scene that I was told that I was going to do Marnie.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Reading the novel by Winston Graham was very enlightening because the thought processes in Marnie's head were so incredible. She was so devious. She was such a complicated, sad, tragic woman. Hitchcock was the sole reason that I could have done that character, was the discussions that we had. I sat with him and with J. Preston Allen when they were writing, and often, and we would talk about the character. And basically that's how Hitch was directing was all just doing conversations about the characters, so that by the time you got onto the set, it was all pretty well defined.
This is Mark coming down the stairs of his family home outside Philadelphia. He is a thoughtful man, dark and brooding.
How Sean got the part was very funny. We had been talking about leading men and who in the world it was going to be. And Hitch said that he had heard that there was an English actor doing a James Bond thing. They were making a movie about Fleming's James Bond. And he had heard that this guy was very attractive, very sexy, very attractive. And he said he could get some footage. They'd let him see some footage. And so I said, swell. So we went into the screening room and we had this footage of Sean. Now he was supposed to be playing a Philadelphia mainline American guy, an upper class Philadelphia guy. And here was Sean with his intense Glaswegian accent. But he was so appealing that when it was over, we looked at each other and Hitch imitated some line that he had in this terrible accent. And he laughed and I laughed and we said, let's do it. Let's just go with him. And gosh, there was never a moment's regret. It goes without saying.
Sean Connery had just come out of Dr. No, and that's who he chose. And when I heard about it, I said, Hitch, how could you do this? I mean, here, you know, the Marnie character is totally against all men. I mean, screams if one of them comes near her. But, I mean, I don't care how much of a man-hater you are or how negatively you feel about men. You take one look at Sean Connery and, I mean, oh, come on, Hitch. How am I going to do this part? He said, it's called acting, my dear. Which was great. That was the answer.
Sean was just absolutely marvelous to work with. One of the nicest people I have ever worked with, and his relationship with Mr. Hitchcock was marvelous. Absolutely no problems at all, a real pro in every respect. The only thing he liked to do and would like to get away and get is his golf. He would always want to get out and have a round of golf, which I admired him for.
Was a good friend of mine from school. We were in boarding school together in Dallas, Texas, and we had stayed friends through the years. She had become an actress rather late. She'd had a couple of marriages first, and then she came to New York to be an actress. And she was very good. I directed her in, I think, The Little Foxes at school. I knew she could act. And she had done several things, nothing big, when this came up. And we were talking about the mother and who would play it. And I said, well, I knew somebody that I thought could do both the younger woman, the flashback, and the older one. And she was fun to work with, and I thought he'd like her. So he said, roll her around. So we did. So I called her and asked her if she'd like to have a shot at this. She was very excited.
I had ordered a cab to go to Universal to meet with him. And of course the cab was late. And I thought, well, this is it. I mean, I ruined this whole opportunity because of a bad cab. So when I got to his he had his special little house studio on the lot. He had left, but the secretary said, if you'll run out there, he may still be in the car. So I ran out, and they were about to pull away, and I knocked on the window, and I said, it's me, Mr. Hitchcock. And he said, oh, very good, he said. He opened the door, got in the car, and said, I'm going over to the studio. And we talked on the way about the script and about the character. It was quite brief, really. And he said, yes, I think you'll do nicely in the part. I think he had intended probably an older person, because almost the first thing he said, this has been a while, many years ago, you know, and he looked at me and he said, oh, you're younger than I thought. And I believe I replied something like, oh, I can be very old. So it tickled him.
Is Mark in there? I'm looking for a free lunch and somebody to catch. I said, oh, can I read the script? No, there will be no script coming. You have to accept the part, not with no knowledge of what you're going to play. Except this is a film called Marnie, and it's starring Tippi Hedren, and I don't know that they for sure had Sean Connery yet or not, but it was a thrill. I mean, I was so shocked. I did feel very strongly when I first met Mr. Hitchcock and his wife that I was being groomed, because after I had been asked to do the part, I was invited to his home over in Brentwood on the golf course. And we were in the kitchen and seated around this, we just stayed in the kitchen, and she was making quiche, I'll never forget. And I remember Alma bringing a picture in a magazine out and showing it to me of Grace Kelly, and the resemblance that they felt that I had to Grace Kelly. I don't know what I was supposed to do about it, but that was his reaction to me.
I had been Mr. Hitchcock's assistant, and I had moved up since then to an office position with MCA, so I wasn't on the set anymore. But I was the unit production manager on Marnie, or Mr. Hitchcock wanted me to be, and I wanted to work with him. I remember very clearly that we were supposed to start shooting on a Monday, and that Friday, President Kennedy was assassinated. And well, there was a national holiday of mourning that on Monday, so we had to push back shooting. I'll never forget that. I'll always remember Marnie because of that. They say, "Where were you on that day?" Well, we were getting ready to start Marnie.
There are so many scenes in Marnie that are really quite fascinating, and the way Hitch directed it, it was very poignant and very frightening, and certainly gave the character a great deal. It opens the character to everybody of what she was like.
Mr. Hitchcock had heard of a mechanical horse for Tippy to ride in the hunting scene. He hated the phony everything of a mechanical horse, but he'd heard that Disney had a real good one. So he asked me to go over and test it and look at it. And going over to Disney, the lot, and on the back lot, and they were demonstrating it, and a man came up behind me, and it was Mr. Disney. And that was, he knew that I was there for Mr. Hitchcock, and he was very interested. He admired Mr. Hitchcock deeply, and he wanted this to work because he wanted to help Mr. H in whatever he could. And we did rent that mechanical horse, but we only used the mechanical horse for extreme close shots of Tippy and to get the motion and everything. Mr. Hitchcock wanted a real horse, and he liked to do things on the stage, so he said, well, let's get a treadmill, and we'll put the horses on the treadmill. Everybody looked at it and said, a horse on a treadmill, that's not only dangerous, but you can't do that. He said, well, have you ever tried it? And, well, no. He said, well, then let's try it. Well, we did. We brought in trainers, and we went to MGM, I believe, and got the largest treadmill in the business, and we brought it over here and started training. Doggone if it didn't work perfect. The horses got on there, and they were walking on a treadmill, and we did do a lot of the so-called dolly shots against a process screen and horses on treadmill.
They, at one point, thought for my safety they would put a harness on me, and, with some sort of a lead that would go up to something up in the above me that would, if the horse did fall, that I would be lifted up. And, they tried that for a while, but it didn't work.
One of the big things that he wanted on Marnie was the street in Baltimore, the waterfront street where Mother lived. He wanted a big ship, a big freighter at the end, tied up at the end. And he didn't want to go to Baltimore. We talked about going to Baltimore and shooting it, at least shooting the... He didn't want to do that. He said, we'll paint it. So we got the best artists in and painted this backdrop of the street. I always felt it didn't look right. I told him so at the time, and he said, no, it's fine.
It didn't work out too well. As a matter of fact, after we saw it in the dailies, Bob Burks and I went to him and said we could fix it. And we could have. It was lacking in texture. But Hitchcock said, no, I think it's all right. Later, he agreed that it didn't look too good. People,
they ridiculed it, I think, if that's a good word. I've heard things where it's old-fashioned now, and what's he trying to do? But I think he had more in mind on Marnie. He made a movie in the style that Hollywood, was based on originally.
He remained all his life very influenced by German expressionism, which was really his first exciting experience of film. He's always said how excited he was by... He worked in German studios at first in the silent period, very early on, when he started making films. He saw Fritz Lang's German silent movies. He was enormously influenced by that. And Marnie is basically an expressionist film in many ways. Things like scarlet suffusions over the screen, back projection and backdrops, artificial looking.
From two fighters who had fought to the point where they were so exhausted, they just sat and looked at each other. It was just things that he would pull out of the memory bank, the computer in his head, was fascinating.
I thought when she lost her memory of that night, it was a sign of God's forgiveness. I thought I was being given another chance to change everything.
This was a wonderful monologue, and I remember thinking because the truth was out, she could finally relax and remember it. And the pain was still there, but she didn't have to hide. The barriers were down, and she could tell. She could relive and in that way exorcise some of the horror and the pain, because to be able to speak about anything to the person that you've been nearest to, sort of cleansing.
You know how I got you, Marnie? There was this boy, Billy. And I wanted Billy's basketball sweater.
I remember having a discussion on censorship, which in those days were much stricter, not even any comparison to what we were doing today. But in the scene where Mother is talking about how she got pregnant with Marnie and wanting a Letterman's jacket from this boy, and in return she allowed herself to become pregnant. And there was a lot of discussion, would the censors allow that line? And Hitchcock was always not to be too risque, but he was always on the edge of many things, such as we were in Psycho with nudity and that sort of thing in that day. But he always wanted to be on the edge. He always wanted to push it a little further, a little further.
The collaboration between Bernard Herrmann and Alfred Hitchcock was, I think, the most complementary between a composer and a director in the history of film. In the case of Marnie, I don't think either man knew at the time that it was going to prove to be their last successful collaboration. Part of the reason it turned out to be their last collaboration was that there began to be a difference of opinion among some parties, and Herrmann, who was a very tough collaborator at times, someone who really believed in doing things the way he felt they should be done. It is said that the studio wished to have a more commercially exploitable score than the kind that Bernard Herrmann had traditionally produced. Bernard Herrmann's career had not produced a single successful record, say like Dmitri Tiomkin's song "Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling" for High Noon, or in fact for Hitchcock's "The Man Who Knew Too Much." The famous song "Que Sera, Sera" was written not by Bernard Herrmann, although he provided that film's score. So Hitchcock apparently wished to have music that was romantic and potentially something that could result in a melody that would be commercially exploitable away from the film. And Bernard Herrmann seems to have responded to this request by writing this theme for Marnie that is a very full-blooded romantic statement. In fact, it was arranged as a pop song, and it was subsequently recorded by Nat King Cole and did absolutely nothing. So that simply was not Herrmann's forte. But he did provide a score that serves the...
Was the last feature Mr. Hitchcock did with a few of his feature crew, not because he didn't want them, but because Bob Burks, his cameraman that did numerous great movies with him, died tragically in a fire not too long after that. And George Tomasini, his editor, who was absolutely one of the most marvelous people you'd ever want to know and a fine editor, died shortly after Marnie of, I believe, a heart attack. And Bernard Herrmann, although he did do a picture after Marnie, Torn Curtain, but it was replaced. This was his last score for Mr. Hitchcock. So Marnie was the end of a era, so to speak, of Mr. Hitchcock's feature crew, sadly, because they were great talents, all of them, and great individuals.
I thought Marnie was one of his most interesting films of that later period. The picture was criticized at the time. It was not highly thought of. It not only did very well, but that was typical of the way people treated Hitchcock at that time. He was never taken very seriously. It really wasn't until after Truffaut's book that the establishment in America started to change rather quickly. You know, if a French cultural icon suddenly says this guy is good, everybody says, really? Hitchcock? You know? But after the Truffaut book, and he only had about 3 films left to make after that book came out, then he was taken more seriously, and by the end of the 70s, you know, he was a cultural icon. But Marnie was just another kind of lesser Hitchcock at that time. The whole psychological aspect of it, people made fun of. I think it's one of the most interesting things about it.
I think the audiences didn't like him being psychological, whereas The Birds and Rear Window, they were all right there, you know. And I don't really think that the audiences liked seeing him get into that. I think they liked, you know, more of the suspense and less of the character.
I think they were expecting that there would be another great romance, such as the Grant Kelly romances. The love story never came to pass. It never materialized. I mean, Sean Connery, good looking. I think the audience wanted a great relationship, as you look back at other Hitchcock films where you had these great love affairs and along with the Hitchcock suspense. Marnie was different, and I think that disappointed the audience, but you know, Hitchcock was in many ways on a lot of his films ahead of his audiences at the time on what he was trying to convey. I think over the years, people go back and look at that and they accept more.
I would say myself, and this may sound provocative and even arrogant, that if you don't like Marnie, you don't really like Hitchcock. I would go further than that and say if you don't love Marnie, you don't really love cinema.